Vanilla is the second most expensive spice on the planet. Only saffron costs more. 1 kilogram of quality vanilla pods can cost hundreds of dollars. And yet, vanilla is arguably the most popular flavor in the world. It's in ice cream, in baked goods, in perfume, in soda. But here's the paradox. Over 99% of everything sold under the word vanilla has never seen a real orchid pod. It's a chemical compound manufactured in a factory, from wood pulp, from petroleum products, and in some cases even from paper industry waste. Today we're going to unpack a 100-year war between real vanilla and its lab-made double, a war that began with slavery and a 12-year-old boy's botanical discovery, ran through the factories of German chemists, and ended with machetes on the plantations of Madagascar. And I'll explain why. Most likely, you have never once in your life tasted real vanilla. Vanilla is the fruit of a vine in the orchid family, Vanilla planifolia, native to the tropical forests of what is now Mexico. The Totonac people grew and used it long before Europeans arrived, and the Aztecs, after conquering the Totonac, began demanding vanilla as tribute and adding it to a cacao drink, the very drink Hernán Cortés later brought to Europe in the early 16th century. But there was a problem that effectively blocked the vanilla industry anywhere outside Mexico for 3 centuries. In the wild, the vanilla orchid's flower is pollinated by only one highly specialized species of bee from the genus Melipona, found exclusively in Mexico. Europeans carried the plant to their colonies around the world, to Réunion, to Madagascar, to Indonesia, but the vines there flowered and withered without ever producing a single pod. No bee, no pollination, no vanilla. So for nearly 3 centuries, Mexico effectively held a world monopoly on vanilla, not because of laws or trade agreements, but simply because no one else on the planet could make this orchid bear fruit. Mexico's monopoly wasn't broken by a scientific expedition or a government, but by one enslaved 12-year-old boy on a small French island in the Indian Ocean, Réunion. Edmond Albius was born in 1829 to an enslaved mother who died in childbirth and was raised by the plantation owner Féréol Bellier-Beaumont, who taught the boy the basics of botany. In 1841, while observing the structure of the flower, Edmond figured out how to manually separate the male and female parts of the orchid using a thin stick or blade of grass and join them with his fingers in a matter of seconds. The method worked. This discovery literally created a new global industry. Réunion began exporting vanilla, 2 tons in 1858, 20 tons in 1867, 200 tons by the end of the century. Albius's technique quickly spread to neighboring Madagascar, which has remained the world's largest vanilla producer ever since, accounting for roughly 80% of the global harvest. And what happened to Edmond himself? Slavery in French territories wasn't abolished until 1848, so he remained another person's property for most of his childhood. Bellier-Beaumont publicly defended Edmond's authorship when other botanists tried to claim the discovery for themselves, but it brought the boy no money or land. Edmond Albius died in 1880, poor and largely forgotten, even though the method he invented at age 12 is still used today, in the 21st century, on 100% of the world's commercial vanilla plantations, including the source of every natural pod you've ever tasted. And here the story takes a sharp turn. That very same year, 1874, just a few years after Albius's discovery, right as Réunion and Madagascar vanilla was starting to reach the world market, German chemists Ferdinand Tiemann and Wilhelm Haarmann synthesized vanillin, vanilla's main aromatic compound, first from coniferin, a substance found in pine bark. A real vanilla pod isn't a single substance. It's a blend of at least 171 documented aromatic compounds. Vanillin accounts for only the main, most noticeable note in that bouquet, but it's the one the human nose reads as the smell of vanilla. Recreating that one molecule in a lab turned out to be far cheaper than growing, hand-pollinating, harvesting, and curing real pods for months. Chemists very quickly found an even cheaper source: lignin, a byproduct of the pulp and paper industry left over after wood is processed into paper. In other words, a large share of the synthetic vanilla substitute still produced today is, quite literally, paper manufacturing waste. Later, another source was added: guaiacol, a petrochemical derivative. So within just a few decades of humanity finally learning to grow real vanilla at industrial scale, it already had a cheaper artificial substitute that smelled almost the same. By the early 20th century, synthetic vanillin had flooded the market. It was dozens of times cheaper than natural extract, and most consumers had no way of knowing what they were actually eating. The U.S. had no clear requirement to label artificial flavoring on packaging until the 1960s. Only in the second half of the 20th century did regulations appear requiring manufacturers to label artificial flavor separately from natural. In response, in 1968, a French consortium of Madagascar vanilla producers created its own certification, Vanilla Mark, meant to assure consumers they were getting real Madagascar vanilla. But that certification only covered products from Madagascar, not from Tahiti, Papua New Guinea, or Mexico, the plant's original home. Meanwhile, demand for vanilla flavor kept growing faster than any plantation could supply real pods. Growing vanilla is still one of the most labor-intensive agricultural processes in the world. Every flower is hand-pollinated, every pod is hand-picked, and then the pods are dried, fermented, and cured for months before vanilla develops its final aroma. No factory could compete with that on speed. Here's the number that explains this video's title. Industry estimates put synthetic vanillin at over 85% of all the vanilla used in the global food industry today. Annual demand for vanillin is measured in thousands of tons, while natural vanillin from real pods is produced in far smaller quantities, a gap no amount of plantation expansion could ever close. And here lies the main trap for consumers. The words "natural flavor" on a package don't guarantee even a trace of real vanilla pod inside. That phrase legally allows the use of vanillin obtained through a natural chemical process from completely unrelated sources. For instance, from wood pulp residue, or, according to one vanilla historian at the University of Toronto, even from processing byproducts that, at first glance, have nothing to do with the dessert in your hand. So when you eat ice cream, cookies, or drink a soda-flavored vanilla, the odds that a single real orchid pod was involved are statistically tiny. What you most likely tasted wasn't vanilla at all, just one isolated molecule from its aroma, manufactured in a chemical plant thousands of kilometers from any plantation. But even that tiny share of natural vanilla that does reach consumers came at a steep price in the 21st century. In March 2017, Madagascar, which supplies about 80% of the world's natural vanilla, was hit by Cyclone Inawo, the most powerful storm to strike the island in 13 years. It destroyed thousands of hectares of vanilla plantations. A year later, vanilla prices spiked to over $600 per kilogram, nearly on par with silver. That price spike turned ordinary rural pods into something literally worth more than their weight in cash for local farmers, and it triggered a wave of violence. Organized gangs began stealing unripe vanilla straight off the vines, and farmers responded by forming armed night patrols with machetes and spears to guard their fields. According to journalists who worked in the region, dozens of so-called vanilla killings occurred in a single season alone. Vigilante killings of caught thieves, sometimes fatal, in a setting where local police and courts had very little public trust. This created a vicious cycle. Fear of theft pushes farmers to harvest pods early. Unripe pods produce weaker aroma, quality drops, and with it, price, which drives desperate farmers to cut down vines, until the next shortage pushes prices back up and the cycle repeats. This story isn't about artificial vanilla being somehow fake or bad in itself. For most industrial products, it delivers a perfectly acceptable, consistent, safe flavor at a fraction of the cost. The real issue is how invisibly this substitution happened to ordinary consumers, who never once consciously chose between the two products. The 100-year war between a lab molecule and a living orchid pod wasn't won by the side that tasted better. It was won by the side that was cheaper and easier to scale. And that war didn't begin with a marketing decision by some big corporation. It began with the labor of an enslaved teenager whose discovery made growing real vanilla possible at all, just a few years before a chemist on another continent made that same vanilla optional. Every time you see the word vanilla on a package, you're looking at the trace of a 100-year economic and scientific struggle, a struggle in which the real pod, for all its status and price, remains the minority. So next time you see the word vanilla on a label, flip the package over and read the ingredients. Chances are you'll find vanillin, or natural flavor, not a single orchid pod. That doesn't mean the product is bad. It just means you now understand why the world's most popular flavor is also one of the least often genuinely tasted. If this story changes how you look at your next carton of ice cream, hit like, It's the best way to help this channel reach more people. And let me know in the comments, have you ever tasted vanilla from a real pod, and did you notice the difference? I read every comment.